Reopened Obamacare marketplace and rescinded the policy that barred U.S. foreign aid from going to any organization that provides abortions or abortion counseling. Some Catholic, right? This now brings his total number of executive orders to 35 by my count. And just for fun, I'll play this one more time. This was Biden in October.
Some of my Republican friends and some of my Democratic friends even occasionally say, well, if you can't get the votes by executive order, you're going to do something. Things you can't do by executive order unless you're a dictator. We're a democracy. We need consensus.
Like a dictator. 35 of them he's got already. And even the left-wing New York Times declared Joe Biden should, quote, ease up on the executive actions. So you know you are a left-wing radical when you've got the New York Times and socialist Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau criticizing you for going too far. Well, joining me now to discuss, Republican Congressman from Georgia, Barry Loudermilk is with us. Congressman, great to have you on the program.
Grant, it's good to be with you. It's a great
you ever
monologue.
Think you'd see the day, New York Times? Well, I appreciate that. And, you know, first off, let me get your response. I saw you just tweeted out something about, hey, we don't need more government regulations here. To me, I applaud these little guys. It's not often they beat the big ones. More power to them, Congressman.
Oh, yeah, but what happened is the individual guy through these retail investing platforms, which Robinhood and TD Ameritrade and all of those came out and they catered to individual investors to get involved in the stock market. And the irony is when you get on these platforms, there are multiple warnings about the risk that you take in investing in the stock market. But what happened is these individual investors entered the inner sanctum of the temple of the elite. And they beat them at their own game, and they don't like it. And so now the Democrats, as they normally do, they don't let a crisis go to waste. They're going to look at ways to further regulate the little guy. I think we ought to have hearings, but we ought to have hearings on why did the retail platforms shut down the little guy when they were doing so well.
Yeah, you know, it's amazing because they do it under the ruse that, oh, well, we want to protect the little guy from himself. And this is the common theme among liberals. They're always trying to protect us from ourselves. I don't need anybody to protect me from myself. I need somebody to protect me from the government, for crying out loud.
I mean, our government is so large, and the reason they want a big government, an intrusive government, is because it empowers them. Look, I heard you play the clips by Joe Biden. The only time that Joe Biden is for the blue-collar worker or the little man is when he is subjected to the rules and the direction of a big union. That's the only time that the Democrats are for the little guy. They're not for the small business. They're not for the entrepreneur. They do everything that they can to regulate you out of business because it's a whole lot easier to control a very few corporations than it is millions of small businesses and entrepreneurs throughout the nation.
And, you know, you talk about the little guy. More executive actions today. He's got the other executive actions that kills jobs. He claims to be this strong Catholic, loves his faith. And yet what does he do? He sends funding back to foreign entities to provide abortions, across our country lines. This kind of stuff is, he's not true to his word, Congressman.
No, not at all. But they have typically been hypocrites in a lot of issues. You heard it about executive orders out of his own mouth. That's a dictator. But that doesn't count when they're in charge. I mean, look at the hypocrisy and the double standard that Nancy Pelosi has been putting on members of Congress for years now. They don't even abide by their own rules. As we were electing the speaker, she had put out rules that if you've tested positive for COVID, then you are not allowed to be in the House chamber until she found out that she may not have the votes to win speaker. She waived those rules without coming to Congress, without us voting on it, to get her people in, but never let the Republicans who were abiding by the rules, who had a positive test, to come to the floor, just to make sure that she became speaker. And now you see what's going on with the criticism of members of Congress when people on their side of the squad has said some very outrageous things that they've never addressed whatsoever. So look, you can hold me to a higher standard as elected official, but don't hold me to a double standard.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what they love to do. They'll change the rules for their favor, no doubt about it. So when you look at what's happening in Congress now, and you have the speaker there, she's now saying that she's afraid of you folks in Congress, that somehow that Republicans are a danger. This is so ridiculous, and it's so politics at play. Last word, Barry Loudermilk.
Well, I mean, you look at everything is playing off the violence that happened in Washington, D.C. on January the 6th, which was inexcusable. Look, we know there are extreme groups in all political spectrums. And if you look at what happened on January 6th, and even though the left don't like us to say this, it's just a continuation of the violence that we saw take place across the nation throughout 2020 that apparently we didn't do enough to stop. I mean, if you look at what happened, this violence just continued on, but we're not supposed to look at that. We're not supposed to look at that violence, even though that hurt the little guy. We're only supposed to look at when they broke into the Capitol where we were.
And what's amazing is we're the only ones, conservatives, Republicans, calling out both sets of violence. All of it's wrong. None of us want it. They only call out one set, not the other. That's the double standard we're talking about. Congressman Barry Loudermilk, it's great to have you back on the program. Thank you. We'll get you back soon.
Oh, anytime. Thanks, Grant.